What is up, my people? It's a great day to be an American and to be critical of everything. So, we're going to have quite a few things to talk about today. Has Islam infiltrated our country to the point where it's compromising our own government and our own freedoms? We've got Micah Goodman coming on to talk about what happened on Saturday at the rally at Richmond because Virginia Democrats are going insane right now. And it's not just the Democrats, there's lots of rhinos that are involved in the process too that aren't necessarily helping us. But I want to bring him in so we can talk about our pushback against that, as I live in Virginia too. But more than that, I want to talk about the ideology and the beliefs inside of Islam that cause it to be considered dangerous to a lot of people. And we're going to talk about how we've seen that some in recent times. And anyway, I'm going to bring Micah on right now just for funsies. Micah, welcome, bro.
What's up, Ross? How are you?
I'm doing good. You know, every time we meet, I like you a little bit more.
I like you more every single time I meet you, Ross. The more we hang out, the more, yeah, we're having fun, man. It was good. This weekend was amazing. It was hard still trying to wrap my head around how awesome it was. But yeah, more to come on all those fronts. So it's good
Yeah, so
stuff, man.
just for everybody to know, this weekend in Richmond, Micah had put together a rally and had me come speak at it, and a couple other people, Lydia Schaefer, conservative Barbie, Jason Redman, come speak at it. And essentially, the goal of it was to bring attention to the fact that Americans with firearms are not the problem. Statistically, when you look at the amount of people that own guns, especially when you look at the amount of people that have concealed carry permits, and you look at the amount of crimes that they produce, it's incredibly low. It's lower than any demographic in the United States. And so, seeing these encroachments, which we're going to talk about in a second, on our Second Amendment, is kind of just pissed everybody off, and rightfully so, because it's like there's a hole in your wall and there's like this problem of violence, and then they just go and blow up a completely different ship that had nothing to do with the actual problem. And we're like, what are you doing here? Well, so Micah, tell us about what's going on in Virginia right now, what these things mean, and what we're doing to fight back about it.
Yeah, so Senate Bill 749 would probably be one of the main ones that we would kind of look at, or HB 217. Those are kind of the two big bills. They kind of merge and they mirror each other. Originally, HB 749 was not even a grandfathering, so it was any semi-automatic center fire, either handgun or rifle and magazine, that when they first said it was over 10 rounds. So now I think it's up to 15, but we all know how this goes. They take a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. They're better at playing the long game than we are. They're better at the death of a thousand cuts, and they do this slow roll. So what they've done is they have wheeled it back a little bit. So now if you already own these things or have these things, then you'll be grandfathered in. But nonetheless, it's a massive infringement upon the Second Amendment. It's not even, and they design all new language. So they'll use language like common sense gun laws, which are the farthest thing from common sense. They're really good at the pot calling the kettle black and twisting things to fit their narrative. Or they'll say weapons of war. Dan Helmer, the author of House Bill 217, his famous thing is, these weapons of war can't be trafficked here. And he does this thing with the word trafficked, right? Because when we think of that word traffic, there's this immediate correlation to sex trafficking, gun or drug trafficking. So then you loop that in. It's not trafficking. None of these things are illegal. And he loops it into that. So immediately it gives that that mirroring. Yeah. And it puts that negative condemnation around it. So that way you're like, oh, trafficking guns, it just supports this hyper crazy narrative that guns are evil, even though I have some that have sat in cases for years and they've never hurt anybody, Ross, ever.
Yeah, and a lot of this too is like, if you're wondering like how broad and how deep, for people who are listening, how deep of an attempt is this? This is almost California style. In some cases, a little bit worse.
Worse. I would say worse for sure. Yeah.
I mean, some of the stuff they're literally talking about, you can't transport your vehicle. You can't even transport your firearms. You can't carry it on a public street, even if it's legal. Whereas Virginia right now, just so everybody knows, it's an open carry state. You can literally walk around with your gun on your hip in public and nobody cares. And for the 90% of people that actually are in Virginia that aren't concentrated in Washington area, like the Alexandria or whatever it's called, and like the Virginia Beach hubs and stuff like that, That's totally normal. In fact, even in Virginia Beach, in Southern Virginia Beach,
Oh
it's a
yeah,
very conservative, ideology where we kind of just let everybody do what they want, and it's country, And so you've got some of these bills coming through, and they're not going to pass the Bruin test or whatever when they actually try to put them through, because
yeah.
there has to be some kind of historical precedent for when has this type of thing ever been done before, and there's none of that. And so, since there's none of it, it's not going to go through. But what will happen is it'll tie everybody up for 3 to 8 months, especially the businesses that are having to figure out, am I going to get a $5,000 fine if I sell? You know what I mean? And these different little things where it's almost like, the Democrats typically do this. They'll ask forgiveness, not permission. They'll color outside the lines, and it'll give them an advantage for 8 months to a year or two before it gets fixed and pushed back in by the higher courts. But for that year or two, like how they're trying to ban the ability to count by hand the ballots. It's like, why would anybody ever ban that? You know what I mean? And so, anyways, but so tell us what happened on Saturday.
Yeah, and to add to that really quick, I would say, one thing that they do is they propose something super unreasonable, and then they bring it back to make the original thing that they wanted sound reasonable. And then they keep on playing this kind of accordion style game where it's like, oh, this is completely unreasonable, but this is what we want somebody else we know. And the federal government does that. Our president, he kind of overshoots or overstates the dramatics of it and then wheels it back. But it also starts to make things seem reasonable that never should be. And they've done this consistently with the transgender stuff to whatever, pick the topic. But yeah, as far as this Saturday, it's cool, right? Being an American, being here in Southern Virginia, we started to see what was happening. And when I say we, me and my wife, and we were like, okay, who's planning a large scale rally or protest for this? We contacted a few different organizations. None of them were. The VCDL had already done a lobby day, which they always do, January 19th. But outside of that, nobody was really planning anything. And no one, as these laws were progressing and getting more extreme, we were like, hey, if we don't take to the streets and if we don't do something about this, then what we're saying is it's really not that important. If
Right.
we just sit by and tolerate the intolerant, we embolden their tyranny if we do nothing. So we we're like, all right, we have to do something. Who's doing something? Because we wanted to be a part of it, and no one was doing anything. So this is why I'm saying it's so awesome to be an American, because like we're nobody, and we can step up and say, hey, we're doing this, and patriots like you come out the woodwork to say, hey, we're going to be a part of this. So it's been really neat. We had Jason Redman, Purple Heart recipient, former Navy SEAL, retired Navy SEAL. We had congressmen, we had senators, we had delegates. Most importantly, we had Ross the Boss. Secondly, would be Lydia Schaefer. Just kidding, Lydia. She's way more important than both of
Yeah.
us. She's way more important than both of us. So she was there. We had a possibly soon to be Senator David Williams. We had the VCDL president, Philip Van Cleef. And essentially, and probably the coolest part, the thing that's gone viral, was a guy that I've met through all this, Todd Schaefer. He has some connections with some pretty big people, including Magpul. And he said, hey, would you guys donate? They donated, the market retail price would be close to $40,000 worth of magazines, sent a pallet. And
Yes.
then they let us hand those things out, which is
Yes.
it's like
That's
so
the coolest.
awesome.
That's
It's
like
it's
the
it's
coolest part of it
beautiful
ever.
rebellion,
Yeah.
beautiful defiance, because these magazines are going to be banned, but not if you own them before July 1st.
Right.
So, what party doesn't have good party favors? We were handing out the coolest party favors of all, which were
Yeah.
empty, by the way,
Yeah.
magazines that we were giving to everyone. So it was amazing, man. It was a very humbling thing to be a part of, super cool. And we're just getting started. We're going to start to do more of these around the state. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I know we're looking for a second venue now to see who else will allow
Yep.
us to put it on. Who else loves America? Really, is the question here.
Right.
We're going to find out who does and doesn't, and then we're going to blast them. And by blast, I mean metaphorically on the internet, not any kind of physical, no kind of physical
I know
capacity.
what you meant, but it's good to clarify these days. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so, I mean, I think a lot of this comes down, there's certain people that are working and operating inside of the government. And most of these bills where they were written were not even written by a man that was born here, right?
Oh boy, don't even get me started. Yeah, so Saddam Salim immigrated here from Bangladesh. It's funny, I was up in New York back in October, November. I got to meet Nick Shirley. We were up there during the UN assembly, and man, I was there to kind of, I stood there with an American flag in the midst of all these Palestinian protesters, had conversations, did street interviews, got to talk to Nick. But there was this other group, two groups there that were literally beating the dog mess out of each other. And I had videos of this, and it was Bangladesh. It was a Muslim side of Bangladesh, and I guess either a Christian or an agnostic side. And I literally had videos of a reporter taking a phone and just beating a man in the face with it. It was nuts. Well, that is where Saddam Salim came from when he was 10 years old. I grew up in Virginia. Me and him were the exact same age. By the time I was 10 years old, I had grown up shooting. I'd grown up loving, already understanding the Constitution, patriotism. This guy hasn't even gotten here yet. And the two biggest things that he's been concerned with since stepping into office are Islamophobia and taking away our guns. And then he won't speak up against the radical is Muslims that are doing these terrible things, including right in our own corridor here at ODU, the terrible terrorist attack. He's not speaking up and he's not condemning these extremists. So, but then says he tells us how we're allowed to feel about it. We're not allowed to have Islamophobia. We're racist. We're all these bigoted people because we might be like, hey, I don't know. There could be a correlation, maybe, to an ideology or a worldview that is producing violence hand over fist right now inside of our own country and across the world. So yeah, not a big fan of his. And yeah, by the way, Lydia sent me. Did you see that? Did you see her video that he was talking smack on us on Twitter?
There was one guy who was out at the rally, and well, I mean, there's like 70 guys that were dressed in full garb, you know,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
full operator garb.
Well, and we were completely legal and civil, like, and simultaneously, one of the most egregious things they're doing right now, they're creating for themselves,
A carve out.
some, huh?
A carve out. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
Where they're not gonna
literally
have to care about
rules for thee and not for me. Like it's absolutely crazy. And I think a lot of this comes down, everyone's political stance, it comes through the perspective of their worldview. And our worldview shapes so much of the way we see the world and then the way we're going to end up seeing politics. And I don't think this is something that's probably talked about enough, is when the definition or the way that you interpret every interaction you have comes through these experiences and this worldview. And we should be allowed to attack ideas, and people shouldn't say you're attacking my identity. If I'm coming after someone's idea about something, they're now saying, you're coming after my identity. It's like, no. We can have a discussion like we used to back in the day in America. Like, hey, that sounds like a crappy thought process.
Yeah, well,
But now we're labeled.
You put your idea in the cage. I'll put my idea in the cage. They're going to beat each other to death, and only one of them's allowed to leave. And
Yeah.
that's literally the purpose of the First Amendment. And because that's so offensive and difficult, we have to have the Second Amendment too, to make sure that you don't try to shut us up physically.
Well, and who did that so well? Who put ideas in cages and let them brawl it out? Charlie Kirk, and then look what happened to him. So it's like, they are clearly not for all of the bull crap about coexisting and being tolerant and all this kind of stuff. To me, it's comical at this point when people on the right keep on having violence perpetuated towards them, while simultaneously they're saying that we're the violent ones, like Saddam's post, that we're somehow the ones creating the problems here. And it's like, are we?
Like, post a picture of a guy abiding by the law, and it's like, this is the crazy guy. He doesn't mention the dude at ODU. He doesn't mention that. He doesn't mention the guy who tried to bomb Jake Lang or whatever his name, Jake Lang or whatever his name is.
Yeah.
Which we're going to talk about in a minute. I'll pull a couple videos up from that. But yeah, dude. Well, it's good to know that we got people fighting back, man. I'm happy to lock arms with you and keep doing it.
Yeah, man.
And I'm sure Lydia's going to be right there with us the whole time too. And I think we could turn Virginia around for some pretty good things. Yeah, man. Well, Micah, thanks for joining, bro. I appreciate you coming on, dude. And we'll have you on again sometime soon, man.
Of course. Appreciate you guys. Stay safe. God bless America.
All right, buddy.
All right, man.
So yeah, crazy. It was cool to be at a Second Amendment rally, man. It was cool to see just the kind of people groups that are there, And if I said this in my speech at the rally, which I'll say it again, and you'll see the video of that soon. I'll post it. But that if you were to be dropped on a planet in the middle of nowhere, and another person was dropped on the planet in the middle of nowhere, and it was just two people on the planet, and you were building a civilization, and they were building a civilization, and then you saw each other in the woods one day, and they made an angry face and picked up a stick. Your God given intuition, your God given kind of thought process would be, let me grab a stick myself. You know what I mean? Because that's a fair. You want to make sure that you can compete in the marketplace of violence if need be, because that's a natural instinct that you have. It's the same thing with swords. It's the same thing with firearms. It's the same thing with your fists. And anytime the government tries to get in the way of that, they need to be reminded that they weren't the ones originally who gave me the right to pick up the stick in the first place. It came from the person that dropped me here, which is God. And that's why it's enshrined in the Bill of Rights. That's why it's a Second Amendment, is because it cannot be infringed by the government. And that's the entire purpose. And the reason that America has lasted so long, and the reason that America didn't look like Australia when they were locking people down, is because of the Second Amendment. The reason it didn't look like China when they were mass quarantining people who now we know it wasn't even that dangerous of a thing, right? Of course, some of us were saying that a while ago, you know what I mean? And during, but the whole process, the whole problem is that they don't have that thing that says, I'm allowed to compete with you, government, in violence if you get crazy. No, they have a monopoly on violence, the government does. And when that happens, historically, millions of people die. And so that's why you have to be so picky with what you let your government do, because you have to peel their fingers back off of your stuff if you let them go too far. Right now, property taxes, having to get driver's permits and things like this. There's so many little areas of encroachment that we've just allowed to happen as a society that are bleeding us dry and making it so that you can't really thrive unless you're making like 200 grand a year as an American. And I mean thrive, like you can prepare for your kids' futures too. Yes, you can get by on 80 grand a year. Yes, you can get by on 120 a year, but you can't thrive with the family without having to make kind of crazy money comparatively. Like, if you were to look at the globe and say to yourself, how much money do you have to make to be a top 1% income earner on the globe? It's like $35,000 US dollars. If you make that, you're in the top 1% of income earners in the world. So how is it that you have to make like triple to 6 times that in order to be able to thrive in the United States? That doesn't make a lot of sense. And all of it wasn't happening over the last 16 years. If you even just went back 15 years, you would go, oh, life is actually not that hard here. Yeah, we had some propaganda going on and they wanted us to get into the wars and stuff like that so that we'd send trillions of dollars to these, corporations that are the military industrial complex and all that stuff. But like, you got something from it. You got to eat your pizza, you got to watch wrestling, and you got to just kind of enjoy your life. And now it's like, you can't even do that. So there's no escape from the chaos because the thing is taking over control of your life. The beast is needing more from you every day. It's like you used to be able to get 9 hours of sleep a night, and so you could kind of go do your day. And now you get like 4.5, and it's not enough to let you be able to try again tomorrow, if that makes sense. You can't make any mistakes in this economy. And that's just not the freedom that I think that all of our forefathers bled for. And, a lot of people had a lot of hope in Trump that there was going to be a big turnaround in this. And I was one of them. And I'm still holding my hand open going, I hope that this type of things happen, but that type of thing happens. But I also have to be honest about the fact that you should hope for the best and prepare for the worst. And I said that before I told people to vote for him. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. And they've slowed down deportations. They've gotten into some new altercations overseas. Hopefully a lot of those altercations end soon, but they might not. And if they don't, then I'm afraid this is going to get ugly again and going to take another $1 trillion to fix and blah, 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 blah. And a lot of people are angry because they think this didn't even come from our country, this idea of needing to do this. Because if we were just minding our business and going America first, America only, we'd be thinking, how do I fix the streets? Have you seen trains in this country compared to trains in Japan? Have you seen trains and like the streets and how clean they are? And like, dude, we live in a mess and you don't know it because we're the goldfish. We don't understand the water's getting foggy. This is the only water I've ever been in, bro. You know what I mean? So you kind of just look around and you're like, I guess it's normal that people are tweaking on the side of the road here. I guess it's normal that like there's people that have 19 old laundry machines in their front yard and live in a single wide that's dilapidated and breaking down. It's like, dog, this isn't normal. We shouldn't be living like this in a country where we're capable of producing so much and being able to get things for so cheap if we play things the right way. And it just seems like they aren't being played correctly, And so, anyways, there's also a push that's dangerous, and me and Micah were just talking about this, where people are starting to go, there's one little country in the Middle East that's causing all the problems, and I do think that government is actually heavily influencing our country in a way that I'm not okay with. But at the same time, they're not the only enemy. That country doing that to us and basically blackmailing our politicians and things like that is not the only problem that we have, although it is a problem. But the ideology that's been pushed into this country from all angles, which is also at the very, 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 very top, where that stuff comes from, is also from a certain group of people's thought patterns. And I just want to show you guys a few things so you can understand the actual danger of some of these things, though, okay? Primarily Islam. And I want to talk about Islam. I want to break down Islam and explain why some of these things have a tendency to become more violent than others. And I'm going to start with this first thing, just so you can kind of see this story, okay? So this kind of breaks it down in a way that's easier for me than explaining it for 10 minutes. Hang on a second. Let me put it on this side so I can see it easier. Boop, boop. So there's a soccer team playing in Australia. They play in Australia. They're from Iran, I reckon. Her family's in Iran. And what happens is they apparently don't say or sing the national anthem with enthusiasm or at all in some cases. And it was offensive, I suppose, to Iran. So they realized upon that happening that they were going to basically be in trouble if they went back to Iran. And what do I mean by trouble? Well, it's pretty simple. I'll just play this. Let me just play this for you guys.
The exact reasons as to why this has happened, I can't discuss, but I can let you know that they are heavily intimidated and, being communicated to directly by the regime. I know that families have even been detained. I know family members are missing. We are very worried about them. We know for a fact that they will not be safe. I've mentioned this before, when you do break a contract as an athlete in Iran, you can face the death penalty. So I know these women are young. I know that they are making an incredibly difficult decision, and I have the utmost respect for them. However, coercion is being used here, intimidation, tactics.
So what did she just say? She just said that if you break a athletic contract with the country of Iran, then death penalties on the table. So these girls, they tried to stay in Australia. They said, can we seek asylum in Australia? So it lets them, Australia agrees and says yes. And then some of those girls that are in Australia and starting to live there for a minute, I suppose, their family members go missing and they start getting detained. And then those same girls that said, I need asylum, go, never mind, I'm going to go back. Bro, I'm not saying it's justified that Trump is doing, but it makes sense why so many people are at least cheering for the fact that the regime's going to change over there. You know what I mean? And so when you have that thought, I want you to pair that thought with this type of ideology that we're seeing as well, because this is equally as bothersome. These are the people that are supposed to be pro-women.
Who do you have more in common with, a Trump supporter or a radical Islamist?
Radical Islamist.
You saw someone wearing one of those red hats chanting "Make America Great Again," or you saw someone shouting "Allahu Akbar" running down the breezeway here. Who would you feel more safe with?
The one shouting Allahu Akbar. Yeah.
You would support the radical Islamists.
Yeah.
What is it about Trump supporters that you don't think you'd get along with them so
Whoa,
well?
what, bro? Like, see, this is where you have suicidal empathy, where your empathy takes over and you don't have any children because you're a feminist and you're a Marxist because you've been to college and college is 95% liberal and they pump in Marxist ideology nonstop. And I'll read you this quote here in a second. And then you come out going, the West, the only reason that it's bad, the West, is because, or the only reason that like the Middle East is in a tough spot or acts this particular way is because the big bad oppressor, the West, has been bombing them and hurting them for forever. And so therefore that's why they're evil. I'm not saying that the American military wasn't pimped out, okay, for the last 50, 60 years to do the biddings of the global elite, and that we stirred over there and destroyed a lot of things, and they have good reason to hate us. And America was not used for the best, okay? That's true. But them being willing to enact violence on people is not new. So this idea that comes from these Marxist thought circles in these like hive mind Marxist college campuses and stuff that's infiltrated with feminism and pushed into our culture and all that doesn't take all that into consideration, okay? There's a lot here. There's a lot more here than you think that there is, okay? And the truth of the matter, and the really easy way to see this is this crazy story. And I'll just show the story to you guys. This was just the other day. You guys, I'm sure you heard about it. This picture, more than any other image I've seen, encapsulates the ideology of the modern left. The picture shows left-wing Democrat Walter Masterson in the middle of saying, we were born and raised in New York, and we want everyone to stay in New York. As terrorist Emir Balat, one of the two Islamic jihadists, jumps up behind him and yells Allah Akbar as he throws a bomb at the conservative activist Jake Lang. This is the picture. While the guy in front of him is saying, like, we want everybody to be able to stay, he's throwing an explosive device at somebody because he offended them. Lang was protesting, and he was protesting offensively. Okay, seriously. But still, he was protesting against bringing in more Muslims into America, given their propensity for terror attacks. Masterson was saying that that's ridiculous. Of course, they were welcome. Just as a jihadist was proving Lang right exactly over top of Masterson's head. This is the shot, more than any other image I've ever seen, encapsulates the ideology of the modern left. It's an emasculated white guy literally in the act of extolling the virtues of open borders and migration, getting used as a footstool by a Muslim bomb thrower whose parents came here from Afghanistan. It's a political cartoon playing out in real life. It's hard to believe it's real, but it is. What a crazy situation to see here. And so the question is, how did we end up in this situation? And when did we stop critically thinking that certain cultures do not treat people as good as other cultures? And it's offensive to even say that today, that there's a better way to treat people. There's a right way to treat people. And so when I look at different cultures, because they're not all created equal, notice I didn't say race. God loves everybody, okay, equally. However, certain cultures allow, just like when you go to somebody's house whose mom and dad fight all the time, there's a weird culture there that's toxic and bad. It doesn't matter if they're white, black, green, or orange. It's a weird thing. And when you stay the night over that buddy's house, which I'll never let my kids do, by the way, they're staying in my house forever only. That's a different subject. But you think to yourself inside of that process that this is toxic, this is bad for the people in it, right? If they had 10 kids, those 10 kids would be in a bad situation. The same thing can happen with certain ideology and certain religion, okay? And so even though everybody wants to pit the West as the reason that Islam is as bad as it is and treats women as bad as it does with Sharia law, with beating them when they don't listen and stuff, I'm going to show you a lot of the verses in the Quran that tell them that this is okay, so that you can kind of see, I can see how they got there. Right now, a lot of people will bring up the Christians and they'll bring up the Old Testament, but the Old Testament is not our prescription for living. Christians have a prescription from Jesus and the new covenant, where we are to love our neighbor as we love ourselves and treat our enemies as if they're our friends, and we love them deeply. We love them. We sacrifice for them and we care for them, so that stops us from committing offensive violence towards them. However, that's not the same thing, and I'll explain what I mean here with a few verses so you guys can see what I'm talking about that's inside of the actual Quran. So I wrote this earlier because I helped me and AI were talking back and forth, and I just wanted to make it one paragraph for you guys so you can kind of make it easier. Islam often becomes violent because the Quran commands every Muslim to follow the exact example of Muhammad as the perfect role model. In the Quran 33:21. In the messenger of Allah, you have an excellent example, it says. And 3:31. If you love Allah, then follow me. Muhammad married a 6-year-old girl named Aisha and consummated the marriage when she was 9. Okay. That's so that's why child marriage is allowed in practice wherever Sharia is followed. The same command to copy him includes the orders to hurt and subdue non-believers, which is Quran 9:5, says kill the polytheist wherever you find them. Quran 9:29, which polytheists is what they believe Christians are too, by the way, because they think Father, Son, Holy Spirit are 3 different gods. Quran 9:29 says, fight those who do not believe until they give the jizya. I don't know what that means, while they are humbled. And the Hadith commands, I have been commanded to fight the people until they say there is no God but Allah. That's why Muslims are instructed to take over society by fighting until everyone submits or pays tribute, which is exactly how Iran, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, and Pakistan use these verses to beat, flog, imprison, or execute their own people for apostasy, blasphemy, or refusing Sharia. Okay? Okay, everybody? There's a reason for it. Now, I'll have conversations back and forth with Muslims frequently that come into my DMs and like, bro, how can you just say this about the entire thing? But it's a really easy argument to make when the hadiths even back up what they're saying. Now, modern scholars, a lot of times inside of Islam, will say this is not quite what it means. You have to understand there's context to this, and there is context to these things. The problem is that it doesn't explicitly say that this is only to be done here and like this. It doesn't give those kind of context clues that would let you know, oh, okay, so we're not supposed to do that all the time. And also, there's verses about striking your wife if she gets a little disrespectful, bro. There just is. All right? There just is. And you can't tell me that there's not. So there you go. I don't know what you want me to do with that, but there you go. Well, so what happens to these women that see these things? And these left wingers, and I'll just read this for you a little bit. Modern Marxism, post-1960 cultural Marxism, critical theory, evolved from Marx's economic class war, the bourgeoisie or whatever versus the proletariat, into identity-based oppressions. Okay, the Frankfurt School, which was mostly people with the J in their name, society is reframed as endless power struggles between the oppressor and the oppressed groups. Not just economics, but race, gender, sexuality, religion, West versus non-West. And so that's why when this is deliberately taught to the kids in colleges, it pits every category into a binary. And if you think there's an oppressor in there oppressed, and you don't have children and you don't have the mothering instinct for your own kids to protect them, a lot of these feminists latch onto this and they hate everything about the West and they love everything that the West doesn't like, which would include Islam, and it would include the West or the Middle East and these cultural ideologies, even if it means that, hey, these women were afraid to go home, and so the government over there started kidnapping their families. Do you think that's a little bit weird? And the lefties will say, no, not at all. I think, we're not here to say that one's better than the other, and like I have more in common with them people than I do with anybody that says that they voted for Trump. And look, I don't even think we're on the Trump bandwagon anymore. It's not even about that. Like it's MAGA has, in my opinion, it's bigger than Trump. Trump was the best person who helped unify when everybody was kind of just going, dude, we're getting beat from all over. Trump was a great unifier of everybody, but now the movement is looking at him and going, hey, dude, if you don't put America first and you don't try to make America great again, we're going to turn on you too. And I think that's healthy because every politician should feel like whatever happens, I have to make sure that I'm following what the people actually want of me. And I don't think that's really that crazy to say or to think about. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of the expectation. That's kind of the goal, is that every politician feels that way. So anyways, my wife made an amazing pot roast, dude. It's a great pot roast, and I'm going to tell you the recipe now so you can decide to maybe do it later. All right. It's chuck roast, has to be chuck roast. Okay. It's chuck roast, it's beef broth, it's minced garlic, or you can do fresh garlic if you're one of those people that has to have your fresh garlic. Cool. It's carrots, baby carrots. Okay. Make sure they're organic and they don't have the chlorine bleach in them if you want to be healthy. All right. But so let me just summarize it again: beef broth, chuck roast, soy sauce, brown sugar, minced garlic, a little bit of red chili flakes, and the most important thing, balsamic vinegar. Dude, if you put it on top of your heads and the word, if you put it on top of your head and the word ejects Foxworthy, your tongue will beat your brains out trying to get to it, man. And this stuff is good. It's good. It was responsible for almost all of my calories yesterday. And I don't think I'd have it any other way now that I can look back at it. You know, there's one thing about marrying a pretty girl, and she's pretty, and you know what? She's skinny too. I like a skinny girl. And, but there's something else about it. If she can throw down in the kitchen, and you know what she always says? She says to me, you know, you think that the big girls know how to cook. She's like, but the skinny girls always are watching their calories. So they don't want to waste any calories on anything. So they want to make sure that it's really good. And she always, you know, I always joke with her because I'm fat and she's not. But I'm getting there. I'm losing a little bit of weight. You know, but anyways, man, there's just so much going on, dude. And it's hard to keep up with all of it, to be honest. And I don't know what's going to happen with this Iran thing, with like there's people resigning in the Trump cabinet now, or in the Trump government now, because they feel like we were pressured into this by Israel, and it's really not for the benefit of Americans. And I can't say I totally disagree with that. I do think that Iran was, and Carolyn Leavitt said this too, that it was not just that it wasn't just that we were going over there because somebody wanted us to. No, that wasn't the case. It was actually because they were planning to build those, what do you call the defense missiles or whatever? They had the defense missiles set up. I'll just show you what she said here. They had the defense missiles set up so that they can continue essentially building nukes without being disrupted, because they could stop from getting in trouble because of it, basically. This is what she said. There are many false claims in this letter, but let me address one. She's talking about the letter of the guy who resigned, okay? And the dude who resigned was Joseph Kent. And I heard him talk a couple other times, and I like what he had to say before all of this ever went down, okay? But she said there are many false claims in this letter, because he essentially said that there was no imminent threat to the United States from Iran. There are many false claims in this letter, but let me address one specifically: that Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation. This is the same false claim that Democrats and some in the liberal media have been repeating over and over. Just because it was in the liberal media doesn't mean it's a lie, by the way, everybody, although you should take it with a grain of salt and investigate yourself. But as President Trump has clearly and explicitly stated, he had strong and compelling evidence that Iran was going to attack the United States first. The evidence was compiled from many sources and factors. President Trump would never make the decision to deploy military assets against a foreign adversary in a vacuum. Okay, well, we didn't think it was happening in a vacuum. We thought this other guy thought it was Joe Kent thought it was happening because we were being pressured. The Iranian regime is evil. It proudly killed Americans, waged war against our country, and openly threatened us up all the way to the launch of the Operation Epic Fury, which is when we went into Iran with our planes and everything and drones. Iran was aggressively expanding their short-range ballistic missiles to combine with their naval assets to give themselves protection. That she says immunity, but she means protection, meaning they would have a degree of capabilities that would give them protection to hold us and the rest of the world at bay while they did that. The regime aimed to use those ballistic missiles as a shield to continue achieving their ultimate goal, nuclear weapons. The president, through his top-tier negotiators, gave the regime every single possible opportunity to abandon this unacceptable course by permanently giving up their nuclear ambitions in exchange for sanctions, relief, free nuclear fuel, and potential economic partnerships with our country. But they would not say yes to peace because obtaining nuclear weapons was their fundamental goal. I hear you. President Trump ultimately made the determination that a joint attack with Israel would greatly reduce the risk to American lives that would come from a first strike by the terrorist Iranian regime and address the imminent threat to America's national security interest. All of this led to President Trump's arriving at the determination that this military operation was necessary for U.S. national security, which is why he launched the massively successful Operation Epic Fury. She then says, the absurd allegation that President Trump made this decision based on the influence of others, even foreign countries, is both insulting and laughable. President Trump has been remarkably consistent and has said for decades that Iran can never possess a nuclear weapon. And then she says, America first. Okay. I hear you. I hear you. We'll see. We'll see. Time will tell. Time will tell how long we're going to be there. He keeps saying it's almost over. I hope so, because gas already went up, bro. Gas already went up. Like 80 cents. And that might not be a lot to you, but that's $10. I think Thomas Massey broke this down. He's like, dude, that's $10 a day for an average family, And that's a lot of money, bro, for people right now. Like, dude, I don't know if you know this. The economy's not that much better right now. It's just not. So hopefully this doesn't last forever. And anyways, hope you guys had a great time hanging out with me and Micah and talking about this different stuff. God bless. We'll see you next time. And love you.